after last week's podcast episode, we had such incredible feedback and questions and people relating to the conversation that Wes and I had around sex and the hard conversations around sex. So if you haven't listened to episode 110, skip back one and go there first and then come back here because we are bringing the experts into this conversation and we're going to be diving into sex being a desire versus a need. That's where we are headed today. Welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open the emotions that take us from being disconnected to connected in our relationships and in ourselves. I am your host, Tera Wages, and joining me is marriage and family therapist, clinical sexologist, Dr. Glenn Hill, and his incredible wife, Phyllis Hill. And together, they have founded the Connection Codes, which is the guide to human connection. And we are so glad you're here.
Hello, world.
Hi, friends. So, oh my word, anytime Wes Wages and Tera show up on a podcast together, it's like everyone's favorite. I don't know what that says about us, but that's okay.
Oh, no. People love y'all. It's just, Wes is like this rare treat.
Oh, he is. He is. I mean, really, I have so much joy that you guys did that podcast. We've been traveling, got back from California, San Diego area, which we had an incredible Connection Codes conference out there, so much joy and just such a special experience. And I love it that we have such an incredible team all around us and it keeps growing.
Yeah.
Like we are certifying coaches. And so they are all in this as far as podcasts and talking about Connection Codes and posting about Connection Codes. So a lot of joy there and love that we can follow up with all of this as far as what you and Wes talked about and how, yes, questions have come in, comments have come in, but I know that if you've been following us for a while, you're probably wanting an update on Meg. So we kind of want to start there really quick.
Yeah.
And just let you know that she had a good report this week that her cancer markers have dropped by half, which is incredible.
Yeah.
So much joy. Her body is responding really well. She's had now 3 chemo treatments, had to skip one because her immune system was too low. But she's responding and her body is responding. And there's so much hope and faith in all this. And she's also doing other treatments to help strengthen her body. So it's all working, and we are so, so thankful for your support, your love, your emails, your prayers, all the things. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I know, do we want to start with a wheel before we even dive into this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I want to add on to that just a snippet of your feedback and like support with Meg has been so beautiful because we've even had people write in questions about your own life, but at the bottom you're like, and just so you know, we're thinking about Meg or we're praying for Meg. And so it feels like you are surrounding us and this really is a beautiful community. So thank you.
I do want to throw in too, just because you mentioned San Diego, it's been so amazing. Almost everywhere we go now, we meet connection coders. It's just amazing. We went to Turks and Caicos last year, and some people messages said, "Hey, we live in Turks and Caicos," which we're like, "What?" So it's just so cool. We went to Hawaii and met a group of connection coders there. So that's just been thrilling for us. But the amazing thing about it, too, is that we connect so deeply so quickly. And being in San Diego, you would think that if you had been observing our interactions, our time with some of these individuals, you'd be like, oh my gosh, they've been friends for years and years. No, we met them literally, 35 minutes ago. But with the connection codes, we get to the core, we get to the authentic self, the vulnerable self so quickly. That's the human condition, and that's how we bond. And, I'm a pilgrim on this journey too, and I'm as mesmerized as anybody that this happens. We always say there's an upside and a downside to everything. The upside is, wow, that's so amazing. We connect so deeply, so quickly with people. Of course, then the downside is you have to leave them. And it was just heartbreaking. So many people that we bonded so quickly with in San Diego, and then we have to leave them. And some of them we'll probably never see again, but it's a beautiful thing because the idea has been for so long that, if you hang out with people long enough, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you'll eventually become close friends. And then you don't. And we see that especially in families of origin. It's like, well, you've been with those people your whole life. You didn't necessarily connect with them, bond with them, attach to them based on time because it's been your whole life and you're not connected. So we know that that's not the case. So anyway, it's just been startling for us, and it's such a beautiful thing. And just getting to connect with people that literally we met 30 minutes ago, and now we feel like best friends. It's cool.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, I'm doing the will today.
I'll do it with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
We are starting, if this is your first episode listening, well, you need to go back to the last episode first. But we really want to emphasize the core emotion wheel and do it earlier in as many podcasts as we can, because this is the proven tool that Dr. Glenn and Phyllis have created that helps you identify what's happening in your body so you can communicate it effectively in less than 4 minutes while connecting with your partner, your best friend, your mom, with the people around you while getting to the core. And so we're going to show you what that looks like. You want me to go first?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So my anger, the anger that just fired in me. Oh, nope. I have a bigger anger. Sorry. I hope I can process that. It hit me like a freight train. I hope I can process this. It's okay. That this last week in Tennessee, they created a law that teachers could take guns to school. And as a mom, that feels very painful for me. Lots and lots of anger there because I just want to wrap my body around my children at all times. I have shame. I have shame because I was 30 minutes late to baseball last night.
Oh.
Yeah. I thought it started at 7. It did. And the time changed. And I am always the late mom, and I don't want to be. And so I have so much shame that I show up late. It feels like everywhere I go. I feel guilt. Ooh, what is my guilt? I have guilt. Because Wes is just such a better partner than I am. He's traveling right now. He cut up vegetables and had dinners ready for me to go. He had groceries delivered to our house this morning. Like, he just shows up, and I have guilt that I don't show up as good for him as he does me.
Wow.
Fear. I have fear around, sharing that anger in case it feels, I don't know, sticky for other people, in revealing that part of myself. Loneliness just because Wes Wages is gone, and I just love him. Sad. I feel sad because I think I feel sad right now because I'm home. I didn't get to go to I didn't go. I could have probably gone to San Diego with y'all. And so I missed, meeting all those incredible people. And now Wes is with other people we used to do conferences with, and I'm not with them. And I'm in a season of like being home, and I feel sad about that. Hurt. I feel hurt. I always struggle with the hurt. I feel hurt because my kids, they just use their words to be unkind, no matter what I try to say or do or process with them. That's their go-to. So I have hurt there. And I have joy. I have joy in being with y'all today. I have joy that the sun is shining, that we get to do this podcast together and dive deeper into the amazing questions we had last week.
Wow. So good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I think I feel anger. That anger has been so hard for me. And I feel anger that my mom didn't have a voice. And I just feel that this is a generational curse that's been passed on to me, that I have such a hard time just touching and expressing my anger. And just that jumps me into fear because I just have a lot of fear around showing up in that space and being authentic, especially with Glenn, and just saying, he'll talk to, like, we'll be in session with a couple and he'll say, just take his face and just tell him the anger. And I think that's so hard to do. And I love it that he's telling them to do it. But I often ask her, do you think you can really do that? Because I think sometimes as women, we've been taught to be lovely and to be proper and to be quiet and gentle. And anger is really a difficult one. I feel hurt that we disconnected last night or just had just that. I feel hurt about that. I think I feel just shame and guilt when I miss with you, and then I don't even know how to get back on track with you. And I feel like our time is so precious. So it's like, that was such a miss. I think my sad My sad. Well, let me go to my joy. San Diego was dreamy. And I think that because of what's going on here, it's a lot of heavy, right? Holding our family right now there's a lot of heavy. And getting to be in San Diego was like, I felt rejuvenated. I felt it was just magical. And so a lot of joy around that trip. And I would say maybe my lonely is at times when we are back here, that there's so many people that would like my time. And it feels lonely at times in just the decision making of, how do I show up for everybody? How do I do this? How can I do this? And I want to do this and I don't always know how to do this. And my sad, I would say probably that sad and lonely kind of go together. Just yesterday I ran out on Rowena and the Home Depot window guy just so I could be with you. So it's like, joy to be with you, but then I'm having to say, I can't see you right now, just sorry. And that I just feel that tug all the time. And then I don't know who to show up for the most or whatever. I just
Yeah, I get that.
So
get that. Thank you for sharing. So if, again, you are early in this process, we just went through what is firing in our body in this moment. And by getting it out of our body, it clears our limbic system, it clears our brain, so we can focus, we can think more clearly. It improves our health and it connects us in relationships. Now I know what's happening for Phyllis, and Phyllis knows what's happening for me. And when we do this, with friendships, it's beautiful. When we do it with our partner, it is just magnetic. Such a game changer. And so
I do want to throw one thing in.
Yeah.
Just because you mentioned that as far as when we or I say for couples in session that, to get his face and convey the core level anger. And we can always tell that people are progressing as far as connection codes when they start tapping into core level anger, they start recognizing it, they start processing it. Because almost everybody processes secondary anger. That's all they think of as far as anger. But because this happened in a session with us yesterday, that very scene you're talking about. And do you remember the husband's response, which is always the response?
Yeah, he was so excited. Like
he said, I feel so much joy about you doing that.
He wants to hear her core level anger. And I think there's such a misunderstanding. I think the way we view anger is outbursts of rage, like losing control, screaming and cussing at each other. That's not anger. That's not core level anger. Now that may be secondary anger, but that's not core level anger. And that's a huge thing about the connection codes is not speaking through your emotion, but it's sharing your emotion. There's such a big difference between the two. And I think that if you're new to this is the gold. This is the part that you really have to learn, because for most of us, we were raised where we speak through the emotion instead of just sharing the emotion.
Now, that doesn't mean you don't convey it with passion and intensity. You do, especially with hurt, with core level anger. But it's just always amazing, and I don't like saying 100% because every human is unique. But I think every time I've ever seen that happen, the partner, and it typically would be the husband, but it could be either one, but the partner experiences joy. The idea of her conveying her core level anger, looking at him with sparks in her eyes, singeing his eyebrows, I always say to them. And she doesn't do that because she thinks he'll be mad at her. She thinks he'll pull away from her, and it's the opposite. And this is so new for most people that they're like, wait, what? That's a thing where I could convey to my partner the core level anger, and that would connect us? And it does, which is amazing and beautiful. And I would suggest the human condition we're designed for that.
Totally. And we have several episodes on anger because that is such a complex emotion, it feels like. And so I think there's even one, maybe 3 episodes back that you can listen to that we also had a lot of great feedback about. And that brings me to last week's episode. If you listened, then you heard a moment in mine and Wes's hard conversation where I processed a lot of anger with him. Wes had a big miss with me in that conversation, and my anger came out for sure. And he stayed with me.
Wow.
And he made space for me, and he didn't defend himself. And it was so beautiful. And so we had a listener write in, and she was curious because I was expressing my pain, my, I don't know, sadness maybe, that in our relationship, sex feels like a need. It feels like it's something that we can't I don't feel like I can just opt out of it without it causing a lot of damage to Wes. And so I was using the word need, that I was like frustrated that he needed it. And he was using the word desire. And this listener wrote in and she was like, can you help me understand, is sex a need or is it a desire? Because no one has ever died from not having sex. So it's not a need, and she was also saying, like, people have trauma, they have physical ailments that may prevent them from having sex. There are all these things that could happen that would prevent someone from being able to sexually connect, even with their partner. So what does that look like? And I will share my answer, but I would like to know yours first. Like, I would like for you to weigh in.
Well, you give many thousands of examples, but is celebrating a birthday a need?
No.
I mean, has anybody ever died from not celebrating a birthday?
No, but it feels really painful not to.
So if you want to, and for anybody, but if Tera wants to feel seen, heard, valued, that she matters to whoever, but to Wes, does he need to celebrate her birthday?
You're actually hitting a really big issue in our relationship right now without knowing.
Okay.
No, but it is painful when he doesn't.
Well, I'll repeat the question.
Okay.
If for Tera to feel seen, heard, valued, special, important, does Wes need to be aware?
Yes.
Does Tera need for Wes to be aware of her birthday?
Yes.
Yeah. She's not going to die from it.
Yeah.
And I would also throw in that there are caveats. You know, you wake up the morning of your birthday and your house is on fire and your freaking house burns down that day. You're going to have a big birthday celebration? Probably not.
Right.
You're just getting the kids out of the house and figuring out what the heck where are we going to sleep tonight? Is everybody okay? You know, so there's a distraction. Obviously, we're not going to do the big birthday celebration that we had planned. Maybe we'll do it tomorrow or next week or whatever, but things happen. So I think that's a pretty decent parallel to, is sex a need? Has anyone ever died of not being involved sexually? No, but if this couple wants a deeply connected marriage relationship, I assure you that on the wedding day, the guy was thinking sex was part of the deal.
Yeah.
and I think the female probably was too. And every individual's unique, every couple's unique. But to then, 6 weeks, 6 months, 3 years later to go, we're going to take it off the table because it's not a need. You won't die if we don't do sex. I don't think you can maintain a close, connected relationship without being sexual friends. Again, can you survive without it? Yeah. But if you want this dynamic marriage, that it becomes a need. Just like with the birthday, you don't need to celebrate your birthday.
Right.
But if you want to feel valued and special and significant, you probably do. Yeah. And there are some cultures that don't actually celebrate birthdays. That's a side note, but whatever.
Well, it's interesting that is the example that you're giving, because I am a summer birthday and Wes does the most amazing road trip with our boys and with our kids in the summers. And so my kids last night going to bed, they were like, when is your birthday? Like, we don't even know when your birthday is because we don't celebrate. And last summer they were gone for 6-ish weeks. And all I wanted, I was like, I just want a birthday cake this year. I would just like to blow out candles with y'all. And it never happened.
Oh, wow.
And it's not that Wes, and I know he values me. I know that man loves me more than anything, but it still feels really sad that my kids don't know when my birthday is and that I don't feel celebrated by my family. So I love that that's the example that you gave. My response is that yes, it's an identity issue. I think in a lot of relationships, which that's where I think that it switches into the need. We talk about in our foundations course that identity is the number one fundamental need of people. Because if you don't feel like, do I exist? Am I seen? Do I matter? When you lose identity, you say in the course, that's as bad or worse than losing oxygen. And if you question that, I'm scared I'm going to step onto. the suicide rate that we experience, like what we're experiencing and how people are showing up in the world, wars, like that is an identity issue. And I'm not saying that not having sex with your husband is going to make him like start a war, but it might start a war in your home, like when we lose identity, that is a need. And so I think that that's where it comes into maybe a relationship by relationship basis of, is that an identity issue for your partner and for yourself? And for us, it is an identity issue. When I don't pursue Wes sexually or show up connected with him, and he conveyed this, and it breaks my heart now. I talked about in our episode, for the first 12 years of our marriage, he's like, do you desire me? Do you care about me? Do you want me? He felt unwanted when I wasn't showing up for him. And now that I realize, that wasn't just like a fun hobby he was wanting to do. He wasn't just wanting to get off. No, it was an identity issue for him. Yeah. And that changes the entire dynamic of the conversation.
Yeah, and scientifically, I would not be able to say that sex drive is not at least a push. Again, it could be women as well, but men are not trying to be activated sexually. They're not trying to have a sex drive. That is what is happening for them. So again, if you do the if-then, if this couple wants to be connected deeply relationally, then yes, sex becomes a need. And I get it. You have caveats. Well, what if you have this situation, that situation? First of all, those are rare. Those are unusual. Second of all, even in those situations, I've sat with tons of couples that have physical issues that interfere with their normal, whatever normal is, sexual interaction, but that doesn't mean they can't be sexually connected. Some of the most sexually connected couples I've ever sat with did have physical limitations. So that's not that's not the thing that destroys their sexual connection.
And that's what I love about how you describe sex, is it's not just intercourse. It's not what the world has deemed, quote unquote, sex is, but it is a range. It's a scale. It is whatever you and your partner need to feel sexually connected, intimate with each other. Yeah. And so that is a conversation between you and your partner, and asking him, what do you need to feel sexually connected with me? And that was what Wes and I got to the point to in our conversation is, okay, what is it that you actually need when I don't have the energy to show up or the mental capacity to show up and like actually have sex? Okay, how can I show up for you? And so that is a basis by basis, per couple. It looks different in everybody's house. But it doesn't change the fact that it is important, and that conversation is very important for you to have, so your partner is receiving identity from you.
Yeah, and that's part of our goal with the late night masterclass. If you haven't done the late night masterclass, get it. If you want to get somebody a toaster for their wedding, that's not bad. That's not wrong. They won't remember that you gave them a toaster a year later. You give them the late night masterclass, they will always remember. I assure you that. Side note, little promo there, but it's true. Because we walk people through how to do that. Because the vast majority of people, they're not drowning in their sexual relationship on purpose. They didn't plan it. That wasn't part of their wedding vows, that we're just going to, be suffocating within 6 weeks, 6 months. That was our story, but we didn't plan that. If you had asked me on the morning of our wedding, if that was the plan, I'd been like, what? No, of course not. If you'd asked her that, she would have said, no, of course not. Is that fair? I don't want to misrepresent you here. But that's where we ended up very, very quickly, and stayed there for over 2 decades, which I would suggest the vast majority of couples, that's their story as well. Anyway, our goal with the Late Night Masterclass is to help walk people through that so that they know, and even you referencing that in our culture, having sex, everybody knows what that means. It means you stick tab A into slot B. Was it a connecting sexual interaction? We don't know. We don't care. They just did the thing. They had sex, which I think is such a travesty that has become our working definition of what sex is. And unfortunately, that is true for the vast majority of couples. They're just doing some sort of intercourse, and therefore they did that 3 times this week, so they have a good sexual relationship. Not necessarily, and especially, every human's unique, but especially for the female. For this individual, I'm speaking for you again, which is so dangerous, She dissociated. I mean, pick a number, 1,000 times. I have no idea. She just learned how to dissociate. She was there geographically. She was not there relationally. She was not there emotionally. She was not there sexually. And again, yes, she was involved in sexual things, sexual activity, but she's not really involved in sexual connection at all.
My mind is going a mile a minute, a million miles a minute. Just thinking about, okay, so the topic is it need? Is it desire? Maybe what's the difference between need and desire? And I thought you would address like scientifically how our bodies are made and like the pharmacy side of dynamic orgasms. But it's interesting that you've talked about the identity piece. For most of us, we don't understand that. We don't understand that it's the number one human need. And when we teach that, we get pushback because even the word identity, for many people, they only associate it with their identity in Christ. So they kind of miss that wording. You know, the word identity can actually be applied to many things, not just your relationship with God. So it's an interesting topic, but I think about that, the whole idea, because now you said birthdays and then you responded to that. And I was thinking about the need. For me, I have such a need to get outside and breathe, to see sunshine. I feel like I have a need to see the ocean. I'm thinking about Echo. She definitely relates to that. Like in the winters, it's like I need sunshine. She needs sunshine. We go to the beach for sunshine, to see the ocean and to get hopefully sunshine. Doesn't always guarantee that part. But, you know, some people would go, I'm sorry, what? That's not a need of mine. And so you kind of go, okay, are we different in the need category? I would say yes. What we need is perhaps different. But the identity piece, that applies to all humans. That is not a, oh, okay, well, you may have a need, you know, for this. And it's interesting when Glenn and I go to the beach, I crave sitting and looking out a window at all times to the ocean. Like I'm one of those who I can stay in this tiny little place, but I got to have a window that looks out over the ocean. Glenn doesn't even look out the window. And we had this conversation a few years ago. I'm like, babe, I feel guilt that I'm got the best seat in the house and I'm looking out the window. And he was like, oh, I don't care. And I go, what do you mean? Doesn't the ocean feed your soul? And he goes, no. And so we're just very different. Like that is such a need of mine. It's Echo's too. And so I'm thankful for that because we partner really well in that. But I'm thinking that identity piece is for all of us. And so when you bring sex into the identity piece, I mean, that's pretty huge. Like that changes. And I don't believe it's just an identity piece for men.
Yeah.
I think that it's both. And I think that as women, for many of us, we were just raised to not be sexual and shamed so much that even in marriage, we think it's just like, oh, brother, wish this didn't even exist kind of stuff. And we miss that comes from our own just maybe core values or our own history, our own story. That's where that came from. But if you talk about it from an identity piece, it's like, oh my word, that applies to both male and female. I was thinking about a couple we sat with last year where they'd been married for a very long time, never had children. And I don't know if he had prostate cancer or something happened with him. And because of surgeries and some other things, like has just completely lost that part of his self. And she is so sad about it. And just based on today's conversation, it's like there's such an identity loss for her that and you know, almost feeling like he's not attracted to me anymore. And it's like, well, it's because of all the surgeries, yada, yada. But it's interesting because with that couple, we talked about that their only version of sex has been intercourse.
Yeah.
And so we talked about, yes, that may be now off the table for you guys, but that doesn't mean you can't give her an orgasm. Right. And it was like, I mean, they were like kids in a candy store. It was such a cute And I mean, the smiles and the light, like they were so eager and so confused and like, please tell us more. And we thought that God only wanted it to be intercourse. And now we feel like we've lost that very thing that connected us.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of her as y'all were talking, because I'm like, yeah, for her, it's a huge identity loss. That she's just this beautiful, vivacious woman in her 60s. And she's just like, it's gone. It just went away like that. And I miss it so much. And he's sad too. But again, it was only because they thought that that God wanted it to only be intercourse. And that's the only activity they'd ever had. And so the thought that they could do more things was just mind blowing to them.
I love that you brought up as well the hardwiring part of it. You know, I would love to hear Glenn share about that, because even as little kids, like if you have small children, you notice they get curious about themselves. They start feeling things. They are watching a movie and suddenly there's a boy that's attractive when they hit about 12 years old. You know, like they aren't choosing to have these feelings. I've already started. I love the conversation we had with Chip. Can't remember his last name in this moment. There's a podcast about
Davis.
Yes, thank you, Chip Davis. Where he talked about having conversations with his son about wet dreams and preparing him. Hey, this may happen. His son's not choosing to do that in the middle of the night, or any of our children choosing to do that in the middle of the night. It is something that happens to our bodies. It is hardwired in us, just like breathing, you know, just like sleeping, just like blinking our eyes. Our bodies are doing these things without us telling them to. And because one of her questions was, you know, well, single people aren't sexual. And I hear, you know, that feedback, but I disagree. You know, if you're a single person and you're like, I am a sexual person and I actually don't know what to do with it, we have an incredible coach that is passionate about singles and their sexuality. So please send me an email and I will get you in contact with her. Super incredible coach. And
we're actually going to do a podcast with her about this very topic.
Oh, nice. Okay. That's exciting.
Yeah.
But it is hardwired in us. And I do think that for many of us, that wire was like clamped, but based on, you know, what we were taught or how we have perceived sex based on society. So can you talk a little bit about the like physiological aspect of it?
Yeah. We were sitting with a couple yesterday, and not that we can do this, but if we could start with each individual, male, female, whatever, but if we could start with each female and erase all of the previous messaging, all the previous experiences, maybe when they were 2, 3, 5, 8, 10.
Yeah.
And I'm not even talking about sexual molestation, which is horrific and nth degree and, you know, disastrous. But I'm talking about just, you know, the 3-year-old little girl that pulls her dress up over her head, you know, playing hide and seek and gets spanked for it because that was inappropriate. Well, what does that do for her message about her body? I don't know, but it does something. I guarantee you that. So if we could start with a blank sheet of paper. Now, typically every human's unique, so there's overlap. There are the most easily, readily sexually activated female is, how do I say that? Is more anyway. I always do that with 2 pens. But, you know, the fastest activating male gets sexually activated faster than the fastest activated female. But the fastest activated female gets activated quicker than the least. Fill in the blanks here. I don't know how to say that. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. But I think you're saying it with your words if you just keep going. You're giving up before you finish the sentence.
But it's weird. Well, the tallest male in the world is taller than the tallest female, but the tallest female in the world is taller than a lot of males. So it's not an exact, you know, well, all males are taller than all females. That's not true. So there is overlap as far as sexual activation, how easily, how readily, how frequently. But all females can be activated sexually. And if we were able to erase all of the ingredients, the factors, the variables that have occurred, and this is true for males as well, we would have a completely different setup. There are a tremendous number of females, I'm sitting beside one, that wasn't activated sexually for a very long time in her marriage because of so many things that happened previously, including things that happened between us in her marriage. So I am convinced that even though she may not get sexually activated for 10 to 12 minutes is the average time for a female, she still will get sexually activated if they have the setup where she feels safe and she's able to explore, and she doesn't have all of these limiting factors that give her the message that this is bad, this is wrong, this is evil, this is dirty. You shouldn't be touching your body. You shouldn't be enjoying pleasure. You shouldn't even be experiencing pleasure. Your goal is just to pleasure the other, which in that situation would be her partner. If we can eliminate all that, I think it would drastically change every heteronormative relationship in the world.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Wow. This is to me, I feel like we can, as we always say, we could do another podcast about diving deeper into the topic of sex, because it just seems like there is so much that we don't say. We don't talk about as a society. This is not a topic that comes up just naturally, but also just what we've talked about today. Like, wow, the identity piece. And I know I love some of the stuff Echo talks about, where the brakes and accelerators in our life. So I always wonder, like, are there so many breaks in my life that I don't have more of a sexual drive? Like, I wonder if for you and Wes, for example, if he stopped paying attention to you altogether, didn't pursue you ever, if then all of a sudden the tables would flip and you would be losing so much identity in it that then you would be craving and you would be going, I need you sexually, because all of a sudden you would be lacking in that.
Right.
Where him showing up in that arena for you all the time, it's like
that need is always met.
Yeah. Like for you, there's so much identity in it.
Yeah.
He's constantly pursuing you. So there's not a lack of identity in it for you. And so it's an interesting topic because, we're just kind of looking at our own stories, where there's a lot of stories out there. But that's just so powerful to think about this on the identity level versus just so often people throw it out there with frustration, like, I'm so, why does he have to need this, or whatever.
Right. Or before I got married, I would hear other people talk about like, oh, he just wants it. Like, it's just a want. I don't need to show up for him in that way because he wants it like I want this ice cream. And it is very different. The way you want ice cream and the way he desires to be seen by you, those are not the same. And that's how I always perceived it because that's what I heard. And I think that message is so damaging to either the male or the female partner who is losing identity in this area. It is not the same as ice cream. It is a connection. It is the number one fundamental need, which is identity.
And we're not saying you can't use ice cream. That's just a different podcast. We'll talk about that later. But I did want to mention, because in the foundations course, we talk about attachment, the two questions it all boils down to: will you be there for me? Am I good enough for you? And then with the late night, we're just adding, I always talk about going to a Chinese restaurant, you get the fortune cookie and it has the little fortune, something magnificent will happen to you soon. You used to add in bed, which I think it should be in the backyard and other places too, but whatever. So we're just adding sexuality to that. So, each partner's asking, will you be there for me sexually? And they need an emphatic yes, not a, sometimes, I guess, sure, whatever. You didn't say no, but you didn't say yes. And then to ask, am I good enough for you sexually? And the person goes, yeah, you're fine. Again, you didn't say no, but you didn't say yes to the partner, and they have to hear an emphatic yes. And I would suggest that is a need. That is, if you want to have a deeply connected relationship. If you don't want to have a deeply connected relationship, no, it's not a need. Well, good. Well, there you go. So, and we sat with a couple the other day that she said, well, I just wish he would get over his sex drive. And I'm like, okay. We can do a lobotomy. We can put him on some drugs that will completely squelch his sex drive. There are things we can do to accomplish that. I'm just not sure that that's what you really want. And it was a good session. It was difficult for a bit, and she just had a baby not too long ago, and there's a whole bunch of ingredients happening for her. But if you want to have a dynamic, connected, deeply connected relationship, then yes, sex is a need.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for this topic and so much joy that we can answer this one question.
Yes. And thank you for writing it in. You know,
Yes.
I hope I'm going to send this to the person who wrote it in, but man, I valued this question so much. I was so excited to dive deeper into this topic because I knew that you aren't alone. Like if the person writing this in, they're like, man, I'm struggling. And the fact that this could be a need, that feels overwhelming to me because I am exhausted, or you may be experiencing, you know, if you listen to last week's episode, you may be like where I was, like, I am overwhelmed right now in this season. And so I am so glad that you were like, let's dive deeper into this. And I hope that each of you will walk away from this podcast and say, okay, we need to have a conversation about this. Pull out that core emotion wheel with each other and do an issue-specific wheel around your sex life. Find out what's happening with your partner, not logistically. Don't talk about how often. What is happening at your core around sex? And say, are those questions answered? Am I enough for you? Will you be there for me? And make sure that you're on the same page of what you are desiring for your identity to be seen.
Yeah. Okay, I have to interject because I just got hit with a lot of fear that our message is not at all that, oh, well, he has a need, therefore you have to put out.
Right.
Absolutely not. This needs to be partnership. This needs to be navigating. I would suggest if you get stuck, we do a lot of sexual coaching. That's my PhD work. Don't stay stuck and get help. And that's very, very anti-cultural for the culture we live in. Get help. Reach out. Do not stay stuck in this. We all need help in many, many areas of our life. But I do want to make it emphatically clear. The message is not at all. So, hey, you're stuck. So if he demands sex 3 times, 8 times a week, then you have to do that. That is not our positioning at all. I think that's disastrous. And again, male or female, but for you men out there, do not take this podcast and go, see, told you, now you have to put out whenever I want you to. No, you go, I always say, go into the garage, get a hammer and beat yourself in the face with a hammer. You'll cause less damage by doing that than if you have that approach. But it is a partnership where you can work together, again, quite possibly with some outside help to make this successful.
And that is what the last week's episode was about, of me losing identity with Wes, that he wasn't seeing me in this season. Like, I need you to see me, that I can't show up the way we were a year ago right now. And so it is this constant conversation of how are you, what identity, like, how do you need me to see you right now? So I'm so glad that you really nailed that home, because that is our heart for sure. Yeah. And so thank you for your questions, for writing in, for showing up every week. Your reviews that you leave mean the absolute world to us. If you have not enrolled yet in our Foundations and Late Night course, guys, I tell you every week, what are you waiting on? Man, it's so painful to me, because I have people write in and they're like, well, we're struggling. And I'm like, well, have you done the courses? They're like, no. And I'm like, well, then you're hurting yourself. Right. You're hurting yourself. And so you can find the link in the show notes with 20% off using the code podcast. We are here to support you on this journey. We do all of this because
you need this.
You deserve this. So let's do this.
Let's do this.